Louise,
Mhm.
thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Been looking forward to this. Tell me, who is Louise Hill?
Boy, that's a question. How long have you got? Grew up in Lowestoft on the East Coast. I am a mum, 2 kids, both grown up now. They're 24 and 27. A dog lover. I have a dog at home I don't get to spend anywhere near enough time with. I guess business founder, which is maybe why I'm sat here today. Friend, all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Lots of aspects, I guess, to the whole of me.
Let's aggregate all of that into the business founder. So what business are you the founder of?
My current business is called GoHenry. It's a debit card financial education app for kids, helping kids get a head start and be empowered with money. It's actually my second business that I set up, the third business I've tried to set up.
Okay. So I want to open that up. I want to know the why behind it, because introducing yourself as a mother, as a wife, and as someone that was ultimately in business,
Yeah.
there's a real why behind it. It's like that's a mission-led founded business.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Gosh, it is probably 15 years ago now, but so when my kids were way, way smaller. And I guess the internet was just starting to turn into something that was really usable and transactional. And I realized that my kids were trying to do things on the internet. Mainly, they'd had iPods for Christmas that my brother had given them. And I gave them my iTunes login, and they were spending a fortune on my credit card downloading music. And I couldn't fathom how, as a mum, to get them to understand that that was spending money. And so we had a routine in our house Saturday mornings, earlier and earlier. They would stand in front of me with their hands out, expecting their pocket money. And I was trying to make them realize that, okay, maybe I was going to give the oldest one £5 this week, but if she'd spent £4.20 on iTunes, then she was only going to get 80p. And it was that whole interaction with my kids and seeing their disappointed faces and realizing I was having to be the bad guy yet again. I started joking about it with other parents, and all the stories came out about kids who'd spent way too much on eBay, or kids who were buying their way through game levels on their PlayStations or game boxes, all sorts of things like that. Kids were transacting on the internet, but unbelievably to me at the time, there was nothing out there that let parents put safety parameters around that, or no sort of tool that allowed them to teach their kids what money really was, and that you have to earn it before you can spend it.
And importantly, kids not understanding the value of money.
Yeah,
Hand out.
absolutely.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And opening a birthday card and having a £5 note in it and having a tangible value of that money, and then being very careful where I spent it.
Yes.
And I think that's a key part of conversation here, is that actually have kids lost that value of money because it's a transaction. They're not seeing it like cashless society we're in.
I would say we all lost that tangible value of money, because yes, when I grew up, once the money had gone out of my purse, that was it until next week. And then when I was older, until my next paycheck.
You could physically see it as well.
Yeah.
You could count your money, right? Whereas now it's sort of an online scenario.
So a very important part of what I said about building, and there were 3 of us who co-founded the company, was to make that as tangible as we could make it. So little notifications, pings on phones or family tablets every time the child spent money, both to the parents and the child, to say, you just spent £2.99 at New Look, you've now got this much left. Or you just tried to spend £2.99 at New Look, that's above your weekly spend limit. To create that sense of reality, and then tasks and chores so that they learnt about earning their money. And
which is a key part of GoHenry, isn't it? That you're actually earning your money and you can be rewarded for that. From having an idea to then actually creating a business, that how many people have ideas and don't see them through, right? Everyone wants to be a founder.
Yeah.
So from having children of your own and trying to solve a problem to becoming a global business, I want to know the journey. I want to know from a founder point of view and ideas to then at what point you're still the leader and still very much involved every day.
Yeah, that's a lot to try and distill down. So I get the first decision for me was I going to jump away from a nice big fat salary and private healthcare, etc., and do this. And that was quite a tough decision because I was an ex-wife at that point in time. So I'd been divorced probably 2 years, 3 years. And so there was just me, big mortgage, 2 kids, both at school. It meant a lot of changes to our lifestyle. Did sit down with the kids. I'm not sure if that was altogether fair or not, but sit down with them and say, this does mean we're not going on foreign holidays for a while, and Sky subscription might have to disappear for a while.
So sacrifices are being made right there and then.
Yeah.
But your purpose and passion for this overrode any of the fear of leaving the safety of employment. And
the more I looked at it, the more certain I was that this was a huge gap in the market and that somebody needed to fill it, and thought that I could do something about it. So so I partnered up with 2 guys who both happened to be dads with kids at the same school as my kids, and we found the pre-seed funding. Now I know that's what it's called. I didn't know that was what it was called then. And launched a business. And I mean, people have joked with me about, did you see hockey stick growth, the traditional,
Sure.
That shape on the graph? And I have said a couple of times, well, it was a hockey stick, but it was laying on its back because it took a while. It took a while. We were the first in market, and that still amazes me. There was nothing anywhere in the world that we could find that did something similar. And so trying to communicate with potential customers what we were and why they needed us in that kind of split second you have of somebody's attention was really, really tough. We'd worked out how much pre-seed funding we needed to get the app built and get the business off the ground and have enough money to market it. Of course it took longer. Of course we spent more. So we didn't have very much marketing money left. We needed to bring in more funding to do that initial marketing, and then gradually the hockey stick started to turn upwards. But it was a long, drawn out process, I guess. It was a really scary process,
But are you thriving on the growth though? Because there's, like you say, didn't understand certain terminology. Now you live and breathe it.
Yeah.
Was there an element of actually really appreciating the journey and away from, dare I say, the sterile same day in the corporate environment? Now you're learning so much and continue to, because you're still growing, you're still developing the
yes,
content.
I think that's something I've always thrived on. My career before that had ended up in e-commerce, always in operations, setting up websites for companies, some of the very first transactional websites for some of the big bricks and mortar retailers in the UK. That's what I'd been doing before. Always running the warehouses, the contact centres, the returns bays, all those exciting things. But I've always loved solving a problem. I joked historically that if everything's working smoothly, it's time for me to go and find something else to do.
That's interesting.
What excites me is making things happen, either building something new or fixing something or improving something.
Yeah, which you live and breathe.
Yeah.
I can relate to that. And having been a founder myself in something innovative that no one's necessarily done or necessarily interpreted, it can be quite lonely. It can be quite daunting. As much as you're thriving on it, there's an element of, I wish I could talk to someone else about this. What was your experience? Because you said there were 2 other co-founders with you, but you were pioneering. You were doing something that hadn't been done before. So where do you draw your kind of benchmarks and barometers from on that? And were there times when you were ever questioning whether it would actually work?
Oh, so many times. Yeah, hundreds, probably thousands of times. Yes. And I mean, one of those co-founders left almost immediately. So as soon as we'd found that pre-seed funding, he decided he wanted to go and do something else. So he disappeared. And the other one stayed probably 2 years and then went back to the security of a corporate salary, which at the time he needed for his wife and his kids and himself. And that left just me. And I don't know is the answer to your question. I think maybe an inbuilt resilience. I look back now and think my parents very, very much brought us up to have a go And actually, that's where the go comes from in the name GoHenry, is because I always talk about having a go. You know, my dad used to say, what's the worst that can happen? And his point was, you fail, you fall over, you don't make it, whatever it is you're trying to do. So what? Pick yourself up. Either try again or try something else. And looking back, growing up, I never even thought about that, but it gives you an incredible strength if you're being given permission to fail. And I think that's really stood me in good stead.
I love that, bringing the upbringing into it. And I think that's a key thing. I see you as a role model. I think we talked, and having got to know each other before filming today, about the importance of women in business and entrepreneurship and being a role model, because less than 2% of VC funding has gone to women historically year on year. And trying to unpick that and understand why it feels like there's not enough girls that can believe in themselves and can go and start a business, because so many women around them potentially have not. Interestingly, your father obviously planted that whole go after your dreams and pursue. Do you see yourself now as a role model? Do you feel that?
Well, I'm squirming slightly as you said that phrase. I do actively try and stand up and be seen now, because I think GoHenry's given me the platform to do that, and I do think it's really important. I think whatever background you come from, if people see people that look like them who have managed to do something, have a success, build a business, it's really important, because it gives them hope that they can do the same thing.
Inspiration and empowerment.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the word success, you know, everything from what was a slow graph, if you like, to then what you're achieving now is successful. Sitting here now, how would you describe success?
For me personally, I suppose having made an impact, having changed something, having made an impact. That's how I would like to judge myself. From a business perspective, so many things. You know, from if I look at GoHenry, our mission statement for years now has been making every kid smart with money. That is really important to me, and it's really important to everybody who's part of GoHenry. And I mean, if I give you an idea of size, there are probably 230, 250 people on our team working for the GoHenry part of the business. There's another 50 work for our European operation, which is called PixPay. And then there's another couple of hundred in the States running the Acorns business, which is investing for the everyday American, trying to democratize investing and bring it to every American, not just the wealthy ones. And it's all mission led. And so success for the business is how many kids can GoHenry empower with money and make them feel confident with money. In the States, how many Americans start investing in a small way and start building their wealth and achieving their goals with money. From another angle from the business, it's profitability, it's scale, it's revenue, it's all of those usual.
Yeah, I love the fact that, but legacy ultimately, you know, that is a huge impact that you have made and continue to make. One thing that I find fascinating is we all, as kids, still learn how to use a Bunsen burner at school and algebra, but we're not taught financial literacy. I can see you're already going where I'm going, right?
Yep.
So you came up with an idea that you then found no one else has come up with, which is to try and help both parents and children, you know, have the value of money and actually use their money and earn it. Why is that? Why is there a lack of education in schools at such a young age when all children grow up to be adults and need to manage their own money?
You'll really get me on my soapbox. Do you know what? It beggars belief. It really does. 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, so in 2014, financial education was added to the secondary curriculum in the UK. But only 20% of schools currently have to follow the curriculum. It was added in citizenship and maths, so no specific place. There was no specific training or content provided. So schools had to figure it out for themselves. And if you think about that, so 2014, last year was the 10-year anniversary. All the research shows that 18-year-olds are still leaving school. Here's a terrifying stat. 64% of 18-year-olds are leaving school saying they've never received any financial education at all at school. And even more scarily, some research we did showed that 82% of teachers in secondary schools did not know it was on the curriculum. So I kind of rest my case. It's, in theory, it's there, but it's not happening. And actually, it has to start in primary schools because there's loads of research. There's a particularly big study from Cambridge University that everybody in this space talks about, that shows financial habits are formed, not start to be formed, are formed from the age of 7. So if you're not teaching it with kids really young, it's why we start at 6 with GoHenry. That's where you need to start talking to your kids about money and giving them the basic sense of wants versus needs, regular pocket money, those kind of things.
Which actually feels like it puts the pressure, I'm a dad, as you know, so it puts the pressure on the parents to actually be educating the children whilst the schools are not, because I think, dare I say, a lot of parents can be guilty of, well, you need to, you learn everything in school, but we, as parents, we really need to understand there's so many things that are not taught in school. And the earlier you start, you know, and actually the GoHenry tool is an amazing opportunity to then actually bring that in and earn money through chores and but have the value of money.
Also, there's lots of parents who don't feel confident about teaching their kids about money because maybe they never learnt about it. Maybe they're not confident in how, whether they think they're in control of their money and they manage it well.
Who am I to teach someone when I'm not even managing my own finances? So everyone's in some way or other trying to manage their cash flow and their finances. The human side of so everything we're talking about here, the long hours, the resilience, what sort of works for you in the world where there are so many books and podcasts about being successful and what it takes, and often that's get up really early in the morning, run a marathon, read a book, meditate, and so on. Where do you sit with that?
I'm never going to run a marathon. Do you know what? The only detention I ever had at school, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, was for telling the games teacher. I went to a convent for the first 7, 8 years of school life, and doing the cross country, and they were awful with how they used to make us do the cross country in freezing cold weather. I told the games teacher that God did not intend me to run. He had other plans for me, and I got detention. So no, I'm never going to run a marathon. Do you know what? Yoga is what I carve out space for.
When do you carve that out? When do you make the time?
Every morning when I get up, I have half an hour to just kind of gather myself, come into myself, get my body moving. Stretch.
So that's physical and mental.
Yeah,
you're achieving both at that point.
Absolutely. That's what I love about yoga, actually, that it is both parts. And I know people talk about running doing that as well. It doesn't for me.
But that's my point. Whatever works for you. So in that moment, you can be getting a physical and mental stimulation and being present.
Now I have a lesson first thing on a Monday morning, so 8 o'clock. Monday morning is blocked out in my calendar, and so is the hour after that. One of the things...
You set those things in stone.
Yeah, we do.
You've got to make time, because people don't realise how much effort and time goes into being an active founder, right? And I think this is where it's almost been glorified, particularly I think celebrities now, in particular, there's every celebrity is becoming a founder because it's almost fashionable, but do they actually really send the right message to aspirational founders that it's hard graft?
It is hard
It's
graft.
sacrifice.
Yeah.
And then making time for yourself, you actually really need to, because that can get lost, can't it?
It absolutely can. Do you know, 3 or 4 years ago, I was talking to a group of female CEOs. I belong to a group of women it's called Wits End, Women in Technology, and a group of female CEOs. And one of the other women said, we have to stop calling it me time, because the minute you talk about your yoga lesson or your walk with the dog or whatever it is you do to relax or focus or get fit or stay fit, stop talking about it as me time, because the minute you call it me time, it starts to sound selfish, and it's very easy to, no, I'll just do a call with the West Coast, or no, I'll just of course I'll take that meeting, or of course there's a board pack I need to prepare. And you lose that regularity of that commitment that you've made. And the point she was making was, if you're going to be a successful leader, nobody wants to work with a leader who's burnt out and stressed and tetchy and irritable. They need someone who's balanced and thinking straight and can be strategic and can guide and lead effectively. And so actually it's not me time, it's making sure you're being a good leader. And I remind myself about that often. And one of the things I took away from that was I kind of went back into the business and said, right, everybody put in your diary, loud and proud, where you do stuff like that. So I will start my Monday mornings, that's it. 8 o'clock till 9 is yoga. 9 till 10 is travel back from the lesson, have a shower, get myself sorted out, and I start my day at 10 on a Monday. And that works. So we have people who put the school pickup in, put having tea with the kids in on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Priority for what works for them and what needs them to be working at their optimum. I think that's powerful.
We all try and respect that, unless there's an emergency. Obviously.
There's a lot to know. I've certainly been guilty in previous years of just filling my diary up with what I think is optimizing productivity, but at the sacrifice of not actually looking after myself and making time for the people I want to be around, family namely. And of course that's then not making me the best I can be. Leadership's really, I imagine you're a phenomenal leader, and you started in the company of, there were 3 of you, and then you've now got a really sizable operation around you. How have you adapted to that? Because there's leadership where you're creating and innovative. Now you're working within a team that's only probably going to get bigger and bigger. How have you managed to manage that shift, if you like?
I'd always had big teams in my previous career, and so that helps. I'd been used to running big teams. When your operations can be anything from that big to this big in a company, and I guess that helps. I think you almost have to reinvent yourself and the focus of the company if you're growing quickly every 6 months. And that might sound like madness, but when you're 20 people, if 6 months later you're 60 people, and 6 months after that you're 100 people, you need different structures, you need to tweak the communication methods, you need all sorts of things, which meetings are held when, who's in them. And so I think you have to constantly reassess and adapt. And I haven't always got that right. I definitely haven't always got that right. And I know I've talked publicly a few times about one point where we were growing at an insane pace. And we had gone, that's why I said 60 and 100, but we'd gone from 60 to 100 to 150 people over the course of about 9 months, 10 months.
That's fast.
It was terrifying. And I was absolutely drowning. I'd got to the point where I felt I was doing nothing well. I really was worrying about what the heck is going on.
What did you do then?
Well, step back.
Did you let anyone know? Did you let the key people around you know, or did you just step back to then process to know what to say?
At that point, didn't say anything, but I took 2 days off and went and literally sort of sat and questioned myself what were the symptoms, because I could see what the symptoms were, but what were the causes. And what I realized was, while I thought I'd done a really good job of letting go, so on the surface I delegated, we'd hired some fantastic people, I was very, very clear I wanted to give them the space to do what they did brilliantly and not get in their way, but too much of what we did and why we did it and where things were was in my head, or locked up in a login that was on my laptop. And it meant people were constantly having to come to me to ask questions or ask how they did something or why we did something. Or stupid. So I decided, kind of, let's go public about this, from a business inside the business perspective, and I called it single points of failure. And I said, let's take 3 months and go through the business, and every single team identify the single points of failure. Where is there only one person who can access something through a login, or one person who knows how to do something? And let's get rid of that. Let's make sure there are 2 or 3. We've changed the logins. And you know what I'm going to say. My name appeared on it hundreds of times. And we still have to do that regularly.
But that's being conscious about it. That's having the maturity and perspective to know that that's a if you get hit by a bus that night, the business is in trouble, and the business is now a lot bigger than just Louise Hill, if that makes sense, because it's the numbers you're doing and all the people. So that's smart. I mean, and I guess I'd like you say, you've got to stay on top of that, and you've got to keep evolving it.
Yeah, but it really snuck up on me.
Yes, but I think this is a key part of why I'm enjoying this conversation, because that's a reminder to me. I'm learning from that. Anyone watching, listening, that's a key thing that could sneak up on them. To round off the conversation, there's so much I've learned talking to you in this conversation, which is a snippet, if you like, of a long journey. You've got the perspective, again, and maturity to look back on from where you were to what you've been doing to where you are now. What's the one piece of advice you give to a younger version of yourself, or an aspirational entrepreneur?
Do it.
Go.
Yes, have a go. Yeah, if you obviously map out a business plan, obviously think through the ramifications and what you think you can achieve, but have a go. Go back to what my dad said. What's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work, try again.
I love that. It's powerful. And one last question. I think I can tell the journey is a key part of what drives you. But is there a destination? Is there a milestone? Is there something that you would love to achieve? Is it GoHenry on something somewhere, or is it a number, if you like? What's the destination?
Oh, there are 2 separate ones. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I'm going for 2. So for the business, continue to grow, continue to reach more kids, continue to empower them with money, make them smart with money. And then for the UK, persuade the government to make financial education mandatory in every primary school in the UK.
That's brilliant. Are you working on that?
Been lobbying for 3 years.
Well, I'd love to help you with that in any way. Anyone watching or listening, get involved. Thank you so much for making time to talk to me, Louise.
Thank you.
I've loved it.